A member of the Stellaron Hunters, whose real name is unknown, wields an ancient sword that is filled with cracks, just like his body and his mind. Blade is a 5-star wind character that specializes in reducing his own HP to buff himself and deal strong AoE damage. He follows the destruction path. As a destruction class character, he will have combined great damage output and high survival capabilities. While Blade himself depletes his own HP for more damage output, he can also heal himself through his follow-up attack, and could technically heal himself through his ultimate when used at the right time. As a wind element character, this means that if Blade is able to deplete an enemy's toughness bar, he will deal high extra damage and inflict wind shear that deals damage over time. Wind element's break effect is considered to have the second strongest extra damage while maintaining a significantly strong damage over time, especially against elite or boss-type enemies. Knowing the details of the wind element's break effect is important because of a certain playstyle that will maximize Blade's performance. I will talk more about this later in the video. Looking at Blade's whole kit, there's one thing that stands out the most: his enhanced basic attack, which is activated by the buff coming from his skill. At certain levels, his enhanced basic attacks deal the same damage as his ultimate if you exclude the extra damage coming from the HP loss. For example, if Blade's basic attack trace is at level 6, it deals the same damage as his level 10 ultimate, but again, excluding the damage coming from the HP loss. Blade's enhanced basic attacks will also be his most reliable self-inflicted damage source to keep gaining stacks for his talent. Triggering Blade's talent is important, since it will provide true AoE damage and heals himself for a set percentage of his max HP. While Blade's enhanced basic attacks do not generate skill points, it generates 30 energy per use, which is the same as the majority of skills in the game. Considering that Blade only needs to recast his skill every 4 turns, this means that he is almost SP neutral, while still performing extremely well as a damage dealer. If you are wondering how Blade only needs to recast his skill every 4 turns when his skill's buff duration only lasts for 3 turns, that's because when Blade performs an enhanced basic attack after using his skill, it doesn't use one of its turn duration, and would still have 3 turn duration after Blade ends his turn. This seems to be a feature for characters that could buff themselves on their turn, meaning it can apply also with Seal's Resurgence, March using her shield on herself, etc. Without even trying, anyone would easily figure out Blade's attack pattern. First, he uses his skill to enhance his basic attacks. Using skill consumes his HP, which grants him a stack for his talent. He then follows with 4 enhanced basic attacks. Each attack also consumes his HP, so that's a total of 4 stacks. Each attack gains 30 energy, so that's a total of 120 energy. With 5 stacks for his talent reached, he will automatically unleash his follow-up attack. His follow-up attack provides 10 energy. Upon reaching 130 energy, Blade would finish his rotation with his ultimate. Now that we know his attack pattern, this makes it easier to use my calculator to figure out the best way to optimize his performance. Before moving on, I would like to note that Blade's technique consumes his HP after entering combat, which means his attack pattern could change slightly if you were to use it, since it will immediately grant Blade 1 stack for his talent. Before we start, here's some quick disclaimer. Just pause if you actually want to read it. As most of you have already guessed, nothing beats Blade's signature LC, the unreachable side. This is Blade's stats using an S1, the unreachable side on 1 target and against 2 targets. Blade's enhanced basic attacks and ultimate are blast type, while his follow-up attack is a true AoE. This gives Blade very strong AoE damage dealer capabilities. As seen on these damage tables, he improves his performance by roughly 50% if fighting 2 targets at the same time. This plays a huge part on his playstyle, which I will talk about more later on. In the calculations, I only factored in a guaranteed 70% HP loss for Blade's ultimate and 1 guaranteed proc of his talent. If he receives more damage, his damage could definitely increase further. Since Blade has strong AoE capabilities, we could compare his numbers to someone like Himeko. This is Himeko's stats using an S1 before dawn. Using their total damage over 7 cycles, Blade is roughly 41% stronger against a single target, and roughly 37% stronger against 2 targets. If you watch my Himeko videos, This comparison should give you a good idea on how strong Blade is as an destruction character. There's just two things I want you to remember when looking at these damage tables. 1. If Blade is with another Harmony class character than Bronya, his performance doesn't improve as much compared to other damage dealers. 2. These calculations do not take into account the fact that Blade could gain stacks faster when receiving more damage. Therefore, Blade's numbers could significantly improve depending on the stage. Now let's take a look at Blade's best free-to-play LC. You probably have guessed it wrong not only once, but twice. No, it's not Fall of an Eon, and no, it's not Collapsing Sky. His best F2P LC is Mutual Demise, S5. Mutual Demise is roughly 7.3% stronger than S5 Collapsing Sky, while S5 Fall of an Eon is roughly 7% stronger than S5 Mutual Demise. You might be wondering, but Dreamy, why would Mutual Demise be better when Fall of an Eon is 7% stronger? First big issue with S5 Fall of an Eon is that it is expensive. It costs a total of 16 Herta bonds. Next is its rarity. While it is a 5-star LC, its stats are similar to BP LCs, which are considered to be 4.5-star LCs. Meaning, it requires materials as if you're upgrading a 5-star LC, but it only gives you 4.5-star LC stats in return. A 3-star LC is way cheaper to upgrade. Last but not the least, S5 Fall of an Eon is hard to use with the new planner set. It would require you a crit body relic so you can achieve 70% crit easily. Meanwhile, Mutual Demise allows you to use a critical damage body because of its massive 24% free crit. So all things considered, S5 Mutual Demise will bring you the best return of investment. Finally, our special mention. The 4-star Arlen LC, A Secret Vow. This is the stats of S5 A Secret Vow. An S1 Unreachable side is roughly 9% stronger than S5 A Secret Vow, making this 4-star LC very competitive. However, it definitely has flaws. Due to A Secret Vow's requirement of having lower HP than the target, this will cause damage fluctuations for Blade since Blade is capable of healing himself through his follow-up attack and ultimate. If you perfectly meet the conditions of an S1 A Secret Vow, it is roughly 2% stronger than S5 Fall of an Eon. For the comparisons, I will be using S1 the Unreachable side. This means that results might slightly be different with other LCs. Still, it would give you a general idea and allow you to pick which is better, even if your playstyle is different. When it comes to picking the right main stat, especially for ropes, there is no question about HP being way stronger than attack. You will do roughly 17.3% more damage if Blade is using an HP rope compared to an attack rope. I actually brought up this topic specifically because of the results of HP versus damage on the sphere. So please listen carefully, as this can be a huge factor when farming up for Blade's gears. If you use a wind damage sphere, Blade will do 1.5% more damage than an HP sphere. Using an HP sphere would give Blade 19% more total HP. I think you already know what this means. If there is barely any damage difference between a damage sphere over an HP sphere, what is the point of picking a damage sphere? Based on my calculations, using an HP sphere along with HP rope would push Blade's HP up to 7,000 plus easily. This means that even if he would keep using his ultimate to reset back to 50% max HP, he would still have 3,500 plus HP. That HP range is similar to the HP range of properly built damage dealers. Not to mention, if you are going to use Bronya as his Harmony pair, which you should, this means that stacking damage percent would just cause diminishing returns, and would eventually make HP sphere overall better. I want to talk about preservations first, since I just want to address this one important thing between Blade and this class. Blade wants to get hit, and if he is shielded, he does not gain any stack for his talent. If a preservation class character is included in his team, that means they are competing for the highest taunt. Having a competition for the highest taunt means Blade would get hit less. Getting hit less means less stacks for his talent. Therefore, Blade is completely allergic to preservation class characters. Let's talk about Blade and Harmony class characters. As already mentioned earlier, Blade doesn't gain much benefits from increasing his attack. This means that characters like Asta, Ting Yun, and Yukong don't synergize well with him. Asta and Tingyun are still somewhat usable since they have better uptimes on the buffs coming from their ultimates, but Yukong, on the other hand, can only provide her critical stat buffs once every 3 to 4 turns. However, with such bad synergy with other Harmony characters, he gets something in return. An extremely powerful synergy with Bronya. Even though Bronya still provides attack buffs, that's not the core of her kit. If she is played as an SP negative support, she will be able to constantly provide extra turns, damage percent buffs, and critical damage boost for the main carry. And who could play with an SP negative Bronya? You already know the answer. That's Blade with his kit, which barely consumes SP. The biggest issue with Bronya is how hungry she is with SP, considering that her skill uses SP and the main carry would typically use SP for their skill as well. However, based on what we learned, Blade is different. Blade rarely needs to consume SP since his skill only needs a recast every 4 turns. This means that Bronya can go trigger happy. Not with her gun, of course, but rather with her skill. Being able to spam her skill means she would yield the highest possible energy gain and allow herself to use her ultimate more frequently. As explained earlier, Blade doesn't synergize well with other Harmony class characters, so if you really want to maximize his damage output, instead of bringing a second Harmony, just bring a defense shredder instead. If you don't have Bronya, it would probably be best to just bring an extra damage dealer or bring 2 defense shredders. We aren't done talking about Blade and Bronya yet, or should we call them B1 and B2? From now on, Blade will be B1 and Bronya is B2. There are a couple of ways to optimize the performance of B1 with B2. 1. Make sure that B2's speed stat is just slightly behind B1. This is the most classic B2 trick that allows the main carry to act twice per turn. With this speed tuning, avoid using B2's basic attack. This should also go without saying that B2 should not use 4-piece eagle set whenever with B1. 2. While B2 will have better uptime on her ultimate buffs, you should still be careful when to cast B1's ultimate. Ideally, you want B1 to chain his enhanced basic attack, follow-up attack and ultimate in any way you could, while B2's ultimate and skill buffs are active. 3. Just because B1 is almost SP neutral, doesn't mean you're safe from SP problems. B2 being SP negative means that one of the remaining 2 slots should be 2 SP positive characters, or 1 SP positive plus 1 SP neutral character. Blade has a great synergy with damage over time debuffs. I'm not talking about the DOTs you inflict to the enemies, but rather the DOTs that is inflicted to your team. Each time Blade receives damage from DOTs, he will gain 1 stack. This is not capped, meaning if he were to receive 2 damage ticks from 2 separate DOTs, he will gain 2 stacks for his talent. So even if the stage doesn't seem favorable for Blade's element, he might be able to brute force if the enemies keep applying DOTs on him. There's no denying Blade's synergy with super strong healers like Luocha and Bailu. Their incoming heals would allow Blade to simply go all out and not worry too much about consuming his HP. In the case where you are using Luocha and Bailu as his healers, the ideal way to use Blade's ultimate is to trigger his follow-up attack first before using his ultimate. This would allow Blade to regenerate some HP and consume it to further strengthen the damage of his ultimate. If Natasha is your only healer, then it means you need to play it safe with Blade. Your playstyle would change from using Blade's ultimate to deal as much damage to heal as much HP instead. Therefore, the ideal way to use Blade's ultimate is to cast it when Blade is low HP. This would reset him to 50% HP. If you want even more HP, you can wait till Blade is at 4 out of 5 stacks. On his turn, use his ultimate followed by an enhanced basic attack. This will reset him back to 70% HP. An extra 8% more or less if the enemy is in a weakness-broken state. If for some reason he is above 50% HP, you can also use this chance to wait for Blade to reach 4 out of 5 stacks. You then use his ultimate to reset back to 50% HP and instantly trigger a follow-up which will reset him back to 80% HP. This self-healing capabilities of Blade improves as his max HP gets higher, further encouraging you to use an HP sphere over a damage sphere for Blade. If you haven't forgotten yet, I mentioned on the LC section that Blade performs around 50% better against 2 targets. This is mostly due to his enhanced basic attacks and ultimate being blast type. The amount of damage being dealt on adjacent enemies is 40% of the original. His follow-up being true AoE means you'd want it to hit as many enemies at the same time. Blade is also a wind element character, which means that a significant source of his damage could come from Toughness Break's extra damage and the Wind Shear debuff it applies. When you cause a Toughness Break with a wind element character against an elite or boss type enemy, this Wind Shear instantly gets 3 stacks, meaning it will do a significant amount of damage over time, more so with some break effect stat. So when you factor in both Blade's great performance against 2 targets and the extra damage coming from breaking the toughness bar of elites or bosses, you can opt for a riskier playstyle. Instead of playing it safe and fully focusing on one boss at a time, you would instead have Blade switch targets after inflicting a toughness break on one of the bosses. You then switch again after inflicting a toughness break on the other boss. Repeat steps until both are dead. Now that we know more about Blade, here are some sample team setups for him. For F2P options, Natasha will be mandatory since, as mentioned earlier, Blade is allergic to shielders. For the next slot, the best would be Pela. As discussed earlier, Harmony class characters aren't exactly great with Blade with the exception of Bronya, and Bronya isn't highly accessible as an F2P. Pela would offer AoE defense reduction, which works greatly with Blade's AoE capabilities. Not to mention, defense reduction is one of the best ways to increase the damage of break effects. For the last slot, it could be any SP negative damage dealer that could help depending on the enemy's element weakness. Just try avoiding damage dealers that could potentially make the enemy attack less frequently. For example, ice damage dealers could apply freeze debuff on enemies, or imaginary damage dealers could imprison enemies, which delays their actions. Having enemies attack less means the chances of Blade gaining stacks from receiving damage goes lower. We could call this the double carry setup. Another good F2P setup is where Blade would be considered as a sub-damage dealer. As per usual, Natasha is mandatory. You then bring a core carry and a Harmony class character that would focus on supporting the core carry. For example, Serval and Ting Yun. You can also switch out Ting Yun for another Harmony like Asta, since Asta can still provide extra turns for Blade through her team-wide speed boost. Yukong could still be a decent alternative as long as you properly time and combo Blade's enhanced basic attack, follow up and ultimate in any way within the critical buffs of Yukong. We could call this the sub-damage dealer Blade setup. Finally, Blade's premium team. As usual, healers are mandatory, so we lock one slot for either Luocha or Bailu. Next is Pela for the same reason as earlier. Silverwolf is fine too if the enemy is not weak to Blade's element. Lastly, we put Bronya as Blade's main support. As explained in the video, Bronya is undoubtedly Blade's best Harmony pair. We could call this the solo carry Blade setup. Overall, Blade is a very strong character that will most likely cause a ripple within the current meta. Should you try to pull or build Blade if you get the chance? Yes. Probably the biggest reason to pull and build Blade is due to the sad options when it comes to wind element characters. If you aren't pulling for Blade, then your only options are building either Dan Heng or Sampo. Of course, if invested and built properly, Dan Heng and Sampo would most likely do the job. After all, there are Dan Heng MOC 10 clears already. Just that Blade would make things significantly easier. The fact that Blade could use a 3-star LC and would still outdamage a huge majority of the characters in the game is another huge selling point. That simply means you just need the character and the LC problem does not exist at all. It reminds me of when Hu Tao was released in Genshin Impact, and she was pretty strong even with a 3-star weapon. She also scaled well with HP stats. Her best 4-star weapon was also competitive against her signature weapon. Coincidence? However, you should think twice before pulling him if you don't have Bronya and strong healers like Luocha or Bailu. Blade requires thinking to play when teamed with Natasha, because Natasha doesn't exactly have the best healing in the game. This forces Blade to opt for a safer playstyle. While Blade is individually strong, other damage dealers can catch up with his damage with 4-star Harmony class characters. Blade is still somewhat decent with the current 4-star Harmony class characters, but being with Bronya is just way much better. Problem is, not everyone has a Bronya. So if you don't have Bronya, you can consider skipping him. And that's it for now. Like if you enjoyed the video and subscribe for more content.